This program is brought to you by realestate.com.au. Keep moving with Australia's #1 address in property.
It's great to have your company here on Business Now. Well, let's check out the health of the housing markets with the weekend's auction results. And across the country, 1,627 auctions, a clearance rate higher than last week of around 61%. In Sydney, 656 auctions and 60% or so of those were sold, plus an extra 1,500 private sales. In Melbourne, 578 auctions, a clearance rate almost 66%, another 1,060 private sales. In Brisbane, 67 auctions, 64% sold, and another 1,060 private sales. In Adelaide, 70 auctions, it's still strong, 81% sold and 240 private sales. And in Canberra, 50 auctions, 52% cleared, 92 private sales. So let's bring in here Paul Ryan, Senior Economist at REA Group. Paul, always good to chat to you. Given the fact that rents have caused inflation, which has caused interest rates to be higher for longer, is there any signs out there at the moment that that is going to abate anytime soon?
Look, really, the rental market remains a really tough place for really a third of Australians who rent. We've seen rental growth start to slow. We've started to see signs that rental vacancy rates have started to increase. And part of this is related to housing construction, which has been quite weak, but also investors coming back into the market and responding to that really strong rent growth. So it's hard to say yet because the winter is the seasonally slower time for the rental market. But things are starting to look like they might be getting easier for renters.
Which is also an argument for property prices to be higher, because if you are achieving a higher rental return, then quite clearly that is demonstrated by the value of the asset itself. So the issue here is if interest rates do start to come down, but the rents don't come down, then the value of the properties generally tend to go higher.
Yeah, that's right. And we see that in first-home buyer numbers. We've got more first-home buyers entering into the market now than we saw before the pandemic, despite sharply higher interest rates than we saw before the pandemic. And that's because first-home buyers, same thing as investors, can see that rents are going to keep growing. If you can get into the housing market before interest rates start to fall, historically, that has been the best time to buy a home.
And yet there's no sign at this stage that there's been a response from the home building market in a big way that would make an overall difference in the supply of housing.
That's what hasn't happened in this cycle. Normally we see lower interest rates, higher home prices translating to a big amount of housing construction. And for other reasons, supply constraints, difficulty getting labour among other difficulties, that just hasn't happened. And so what that means is we haven't had the supply response to the increase in housing demand. And that's why we know really that the balance between housing supply and demand is going to be very tight for the coming years.
Notwithstanding the fact that migration has also fallen in Australia, it's a situation that you've still got this strong demand that's coming from the people who are already here.
Yeah, I mean, we're getting back to levels of migration that we saw before the pandemics, and that's a high rate of migration. There's always been high housing demand in Australia. But yeah, housing demand has been really strong, and really because we're not building the same rate of homes that we were before the pandemic, that amount of demand isn't able to be absorbed.
Okay, and the only other thing that might change is the number of people per household. If that were to change and more people lived in the same household, that might change it just a little bit.
I think we're already seeing that. We're seeing more demand for people to live in share homes. I think if you talk to first-home buyers, a lot are staying at home longer. All of these little decisions that people make mean that there are more people per household, and that takes the pressure off housing demand. But it's because housing costs are higher. People are responding to the fact that they just can't afford the amount of housing they would like to have.
Tell you what, Paul Ryan, great to have you on the program. As always, many thanks for your time.
Thank you very much.